Businesses talk about accountability. Oh, I've got to hold people accountable. What a crock of shit. You want to hold somebody accountable? Go form a frickin' human connection with that person.
If you change the nuance of the question, you open a whole different world of possibilities, because then you go, well, maybe we don't even have to create this because this already exists.
If you build something from that place, now you have a culture rooted in connection and love, rather than a culture rooted in a mission statement and a compliance checkbox.
So, mate, we have a listener question, topic really, rather than a question for today. So this comes from...
Sounds good. Tee it up.
Yeah, this comes from Andy Wild. He said he'd be interested to know what our thoughts are on culture and the building and fostering of cultures. And he specifically wanted to raise this because he's been talking to a number of people in his network, particularly some senior folks in one company who I won't mention, and they had shared with him that businesses are having to try and work out how they build culture in this current time.
Yeah, no, this is very topical because I'm working with a couple of companies at the moment on this topic, and it's a topic that never goes away. Even if you have a great culture, it's a topic that you are constantly keeping one eye on, I think, because you either want to get to a place where you feel like you've got this really great sort of DNA, or if you've got it and you're feeling the magic, you want to preserve it, and you want to feed it, and you want to use it as a competitive advantage. And so I think this is a really interesting one. And post-COVID, we're all aware of some of the major challenges that working remotely pose, and just not getting together and forming human connections. And I think it's quite difficult, particularly for young people who have come out of university or come out of high school or what have you. They've entered the workforce, they're in a job for the first time, and their whole experience of office life, of corporate life, is from behind a bank of screens, sitting in their bedroom or their spare bedroom or the lounge, and it's very difficult to infuse the culture and for them to get a real sense of what it's like to work at a place, and what it's all about, and feel connected to a strong sense of purpose, if they're remote. And so I think it's a really interesting topic, but I think it can be done. Well, we are doing it. I mean, people are being super innovative, and in some instances, which are, the hand is being forced. You have to figure this stuff out, and that's where human beings are so remarkably creative, particularly when they operate from that place of awareness that we keep pointing to. But this is an interesting thing, because in some of the work that I'm doing, we've been turning the crank on this idea of culture, and codifying it with well thought through values that you try to infuse into the drinking water, and you get people to role model and be very aware of, and think about how they show up, and operate from the open hand mindset, as opposed to being the closed fist. But there's an interesting thing that I think is missing, and it's this whole idea of human connection. And I think Alan Lyons said it beautifully on a previous podcast, is like busyness kills the heart. And when people talk about culture, you're talking about the heart of the organization. And it's sometimes it's quite an intangible thing, right? It's not the numbers that the salespeople post or the operational efficiency or the whatever. It's this intangible heart that I think a lot of people, and certainly a lot of senior execs, just dismiss. I think a lot of people don't even want to go there. They know they need to talk about it, and the chief people officer tells them that they need to take this seriously. But very few see it as a true competitive advantage. Um, and so this whole idea of the human connection, making time for the human connection, and that really resonated with me with when Alan mentioned it. And so I've actually been exploring this a bit in the week since we last spoke to Alan, and this idea of an accountability buddy. And I don't really like the word accountability, if I'm perfectly honest, but this idea of a buddy system where where with a set of well-defined values and a profound sense of purpose and a mission that you're all on together, like hopefully, you know, that's been used as a lens to attract you into the business, and it's a reason why you joined the business. But then to have this buddy system where, like you and I did for years, where we spoke every Friday, and we took the world, we turned it upside down, we gave it a good shake, and we saw what fell out of the pockets. And through that exploration, we 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 formulated our own sense of values and our own sense of how to operate and how to care for people and be compassionate leaders and explore all of that together. And I think there's something in that I want to go and explore.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting to me where culture fits in an organization or in the corporate zeitgeist. Whenever I hear people talk about culture, it often sounds to me like they're talking about it like it's a project or a task. You know, how do we redesign culture in this day and age? How do we make sure our culture is fit for purpose? And I'm not sure that is a super productive way of looking at it. And it makes me think of that Peter Drucker quote, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Because if I think about, you know, my time in corporate land, and if I was to weigh up the amount of time that was spent on thinking and really nurturing culture versus the amount of time spent on thinking about and nurturing strategy, I would probably put it somewhere in the, like, I don't know, it's heavily weighted to strategy. And culture became a topic when it was perceived to be broken. Morale is low. What's happening? How do we right size the culture? What's going on? And I say that because I think we have to look at it differently. You know, and what you said about what Alan Lyons had said, you know, busyness kills the heart. I did a talk a couple of months ago in Washington, and the topic was collaborate to win. And I was positioning to that audience, and they were amazing people. So like, you don't need to be educated on collaboration. There's no mystery here. Like, we are built to collaborate really effectively. We are built to connect. And funnily enough, I use the image of a heart to kind of land the point. I was saying, most other parts of our lives outside of the business world, we are very much more heart led. We can show up with friends, with family. We actually show up with complete strangers and be just much more open hearted, open minded. And we fall into this level of connection, and we create some extraordinary things. And, when we look at, and I was using the example of emergency services, um, sport, um, any number of kind of areas in life where we're just kind of thrown in. And sometimes it's either a crisis or sometimes it's just what we consider to be a very natural scenario. And we are heart led, which means that we put people first. And we know that we're going to achieve whatever task it is, we're more likely to achieve it together. And I don't know who said this, but there's another phrase that pops into my mind which said, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think that's what we're talking about here. For me, anyway, it's rather than thinking what are the tactics of culture, I would bring it back and say that the first thing that I would love to kind of blow up is the idea that culture is something that you do. It's a task or a project, and then you move on. I would more think about it as being culture is perhaps the number one foundational block, which will have the single biggest
Mm.
impact on the success that your organization will have and the length of time that that success will continue for. And so
Yeah.
I'm really interested to kind of think about that as is that just a post-COVID thing, or has that always been true, except it was neatly disguised because it didn't kind of seem like such an obvious pain point.
No, I think it's always been there. And I mean, we can cite examples of leaders throughout the ages who understood this very well. There are examples of communities that understood this very well and protected it. I mean, the sports teams are a great example over the decades, certainly since you and I have been alive, where you know the number one thing when you drill down into the success and longevity of a franchise is the culture. And yes, great players come and go and what have you, but the the preservation of what they hold dear and what certain people bring to an organization is what determines its longevity. And I think um, to your point, culture's not one and done. And you're right. I think a lot of organizations do sort of treat it as this is something we have to do, and let's just give it to somebody in HR, and then we can check the box and we can move on. And I think increasingly, and maybe COVID shone a light on this, which was a good thing, is um, increasingly organizations are seeing this as a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Because how do you win the war on talent? How do you achieve, economic and growth success if you have a revolving door and people are just leaving your organization? You're bringing, and you and I have seen examples of this across multiple organizations. But when you get it right and people are locked in and they have this profound sense of connection to something, even if they don't call it culture or they don't call it love or they don't call it, purpose, there's a very powerful momentum that builds, and then the flywheel goes, and it takes on an energy all of its own that is quite remarkable. I mean, it can be incredibly powerful, and it does act as a profound advantage for those that get it right. And and so I come back to this point because I think you put your finger on it. Like this whole idea of human connection, and I would vouch that you go back throughout the ages, and cite examples of where culture ate strategy for lunch. Um, it 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 started with this profound sense of human connection. Um, and I defy anybody to find an example where that's not true. And so I would I think culture is connection. You know, without connection, culture does not exist. And so sort of bringing it back to the world that we love to explore is when, and this is a really interesting kind of angle on it, because I think when culture becomes a topic that is rooted in the intellect, which is what you were pointing to, where it's kind of like, oh, we've got to do culture, like let's give this to an HR person. It fails. And it's not because HR people are crap at culture. That's not the point. It's rooted in the intellect. But when something happens and there's a profound sense of connection and people fall back into their being and they connect from that place of awareness, now it's not rooted in the intellect. Now it's rooted in the knowing, in the being. And from that place, a cultural connection, a DNA, a connectivity, connective tissue, whatever you want to call it, that happens. And I think when it comes from that wellspring, it is it it lasts. It's rooted in something deeper. And you and I have said this multiple times. It's love. Like that's that's what that is. It's love. It's empathy. And so the examples you cited, like when shit goes sideways and human beings do remarkable things, they're operating from that place of love. They're operating from a place of being rather than like operating from their intellect and their profound sense of misguided identity. um, and so it's I think it's a really fascinating thing to explore because people don't, like, some leaders just don't want to go there. They want people to lead, manage, and coach, but they don't want to do the practice of exploring the the awareness piece, and then understanding that if you build something from that place, now you have a culture. Now you have a pervasive culture rooted in connection and love, the very essence of what it means to be human, rather than a culture rooted in uh, some, just values, a mission statement, and a compliance checkbox.
You have a culture in a business one way or the other. Like that's just there's
Yeah.
you have a culture. It's just a fact because a culture is whatever it is, and it's not what you say it is. It's what people see, hear, and feel on a daily basis. And I think where you finish there, in many ways, is actually the starting point because you have to start with the end in mind, which is what is the culture you want? And the very next question is, and are you willing to actually do the work to cultivate the culture, to create the culture that you want? Because you're going to get one, and talk is cheap. And that is the problem. Like that is the problem that we experience on an individual level as much as we experience on an organizational level. which is people will say things like, and I say people, I include myself in this and I include you in it, because we're all human beings. So we say things like, I want more peace and contentment, or I want more of this. And it's like, well, you can have that. And the next question is, but are you willing to do what's necessary? Are you willing to let go of some of your beliefs that get in the way? Are you willing to challenge the attachments that you have, which get in your way? Because if you're not willing, then you're not going to get what you want. And whatever you have, you've created it. We build the perfect systems to create the lives that we have. And that's a really comforting thing to know, because if you know that you've built the perfect system to have what you've gotten, then it means you can go and you can rework something and create something brand new. But just like everything that we've ever talked about, but the work starts on the inside. And if you're not prepared to do the work on the inside, then expect little to no transformation on the outside. And I think you've said this on previous episodes. The level of transformation that you want within your organization is pretty much 100% dictated by the level of transformation you're prepared to go on the inside, individually and collectively. And I find that, I think that's the piece that you've already pointed to, which is, a lot of senior leadership teams, if they were to be really honest, are actually not prepared to do that work. It's easier to kind of pass it off as woo-woo, HRE stuff. It's the soft stuff. And yeah, we've got to do some of it, but really, we're about growth and, driving the business forward. And that's fine. Like, if that's the culture you want, then that's the culture you're going to get. I think what we're talking about here is, I guess we're pointing to the possibility of, a human, your human connection, a heart-led culture, as being perhaps one of the most powerful cultures that you can have. And I would say it's probably equally one of the toughest ones to get after, at least in the first instance, because you've got to go through the process of creating an awareness of what that actually means, creating an awareness within people as to what they've naturally got on their side. And once you've done that, then you have to go through the process of blowing up not just the thought-created illusions that get in the way, but you actually have to blow up a whole bunch of systems and processes which fly in the face of that. Because the systems and processes are not designed on the idea that everyone is doing their best based on what they see to be true in the moment. Most systems and processes are designed that a small number of people know what's best, and therefore the systems and processes are designed to try and keep everyone else in line. And so that to me is the work that's required. And you know what? If you do the work, I would say it doesn't matter whether you've got a remote business, a hybrid business, or an in-office business. That just looks like the illusion. It's like, which one of those is the best for culture? It's like they're all the best for culture because they don't dictate culture. Culture comes long before that. And it's very purposeful and it requires real courage. And, we know of people and businesses that, that do some incredible work within corporations of going in and actually building this awareness and really, challenging organizations and the people that lead them to look in a completely different direction. And so I imagine if, Andy was listening to this, and I'll finish with this because I know you've got something to say. I imagine if Andy was listening to this, or one of the senior folks at any of these companies, I just wonder whether it's still the old world view that they're kind of looking through of like, how do we just kind of get culture so it's not an obstacle, versus like that opportunity to be like, are we really prepared to look in an entirely different direction to see culture as something which is, transformative, foundational, and that would look radically different to perhaps anything they've had in the past.
Well, an insight that came up for me while you were talking is, I think you said it right at the top of the podcast. You mentioned family, and it's always remarkable that people at work in the corporate environment, where they spend more time with these people than they do with their families, don't apply the same formula for how to bake the cake. So, like, if you want to have a great relationship with your kids, you don't set them a bunch of KPIs and tell them to go execute. You actually spend quite a lot of time with them, and you forming these connections. You put in a big effort to 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 have these connections and to ask them questions. And but at the top of the podcast before we came on the air, I was talking about this amazing coach for men's basketball at Duke University, Mike Krzyzewski. Like, he had I think he's retired now, but he just stepped down. But he had over 1,200 career wins, which is the most in the NCAA history. Um, and he had this winning culture at Duke, and he had some star players, and then he had some average teams, but he always felt that showing respect, being respectful of the team culture and the performance was paramount to building a great organization. And he had two questions that he used to ask. The first powerful question he used to ask his players was, "How are you feeling?" Like, how are you feeling? And getting in underneath the superfluous, identity-led, intellectual nonsense that we should just, again, strap a big ton of TNT to and just blow that out of the water. It's getting to the awareness of self. How are you feeling? Where are you at? What is your mindset? Are you down here, or are you up here with the open hand? And so that was the first question. And then the second question is, what do you think of that? So using that question to sort of get their input, get their take on a play or an assessment, or whatever they were sparring about, and inviting that person in. And so and you do it with your kids, right? Or hopefully some parents do it with their kids, where they're like, "Hey, how are you feeling? How was your day at school? How was your day at work? How was, where are you at?" And then tell me about how you think about things, like inviting them in. Now, when you do that, you build this amazing connection with this member of your family, and then you're able to go and do remarkable things either together, or they're able to go and do remarkable things because they're operating from this place where they know that you've got their back. And so they can go backpacking around the world, or they can go and pursue this career, or they can, whatever it is, like they can go and do things. And it's weird that people don't do that at work. And so you get people coming to work, and they might even be amazing parents. Like, it's inconceivable to me that, like, the majority of senior leaders in businesses are shit parents. Like, they probably, like, some of them are amazing parents, but when they come to work, they don't apply that same approach to building that connective tissue, and showing that respect and understanding how people are feeling. Because you know what? That's not what killers do. Killers don't get into the soft stuff. They They drive, drive, drive. They hold people accountable. They make the tough decisions. They fire the non-performers, and away they go. And I think increasingly organizations are going, that's not sustainable, number one. And two, people vote with their feet. And so now it's a case of, okay, how do we consciously apply this human element? And it's made difficult because some of it's all virtual. How do we form these connections? Because from that place, in the same way with your kids, suddenly you have trust. Suddenly you have trust, so you can have hard conversations. And then when you have hard conversations, you're like, oh shit, okay, cool, yeah. Um, that was we've beaten this up together. Okay, let's go commit and do stuff. And then holding each other accountable becomes actually quite easy because businesses talk about accountability. Oh, I've got to hold people accountable. What a crock of shit. You want to hold somebody accountable? Go form a freaking human connection with that person. Then you get to hold them accountable. And they get to hold you accountable to the same mutually agreed set of standards. And so it's just really, it seems so simple, but it seems to be with beyond the reach of so many.
Well, I love when you get passionate. Um, it is simple. It's because it's freaking hard, and I do think there's a toughness to this, which is a reality. Like actually, as you were talking about the family stuff, I think it's bloody hard when it comes to family as well. I don't. I don't think. I think. I think there's some interesting correlations to be had when you start to look at the challenges that exist in family units, um, and challenges that exist in the organizational in the business world. The only difference is like you don't get to choose your family, so you're kind of stuck with them. So there's no get out of jail easy card, at least, um, whether it's get out of jail free. But and the reason I said it is because I don't think that necessarily family just automatically means that we do some of the things that we would love to do. I think it still comes back to the same question. When we think about family units and we think about business units, we go, what would be great? And I don't know about you, but like I can hear that I would have said a lot of the same things that I say about family in the context of business. Some slightly different. And I think about people that I ask this question to, and it's amazingly consistent. What sort of culture would you like to have? Like a really high trust, highly connected, highly performing culture where people are going to look back and they're going to remember their time here as being like formative, and they're going to have a fondness, and you're like, we want to do extraordinary things. We want to build a culture that supports the achievement of extraordinary things. Like, amazing. You talk to people about family and you say, what sort of family culture are you trying to build? And, probably love comes in it more easily, but it would be like highly loving, deep trust, you know, and a family unit that's going to look back in years to come on like so many incredible memories, and, you know, with a deep gratitude for the time that they spent together. And it's like, oh, okay, great. What gets in the so what's getting in the way? Because it seems pretty clear. And it goes, well, busyness kills the heart. We don't have time. There's so much to do. People don't always do what you think they should do. Um, you know, it's what else do I think people say? It's not that simple. There's lots of other factors. My job, like it's the if I think about parents, parents go, it's my job to keep them safe, so I have to tell them what to do. You're like, oh, okay. It's my job to keep this company safe, so I have to tell them what to do. And so you start to see that like everyone wants the same thing, but then you go, well, if you know what you want, like what is it that gets in the way? And and that's where, in this case, I think that the similarities are so powerful to see, because when we talk about trust, like the thing that gets in the way of trust is that we think trust means that everyone will do exactly what they say they're going to do, and that if they don't, that means we can't trust them. I'm like, well, since when is that on offer? Like, I have never in the history of ever come across a human being that has a 100% hit rate on delivering on everything they say they're going to do, even if they have the best of intentions. So that's pretty fucked, because if trust is dependent on everyone being super predictable, well, that must mean that you can't have trust. But yet we know that we can. So like there's one thing we got to blow up. It's like people have got to earn my trust. Oh, right. So, when your child came out of the womb, how long did you wait before you thought that before they had to earn your trust? Or did you just love them and trust them instantly? Because that kind of blows that one up. Or, have you ever met someone in your life that's in a non-work context that you just fallen in love with and just like, you just trust them instantly?
I, I think you've used this analogy before. Like, you know, you're on um a precipice and you slip and fall and you're holding onto a branch, and then a voice says, "Let go of the branch, and you're going to be okay."
Hmm.
And I think about, like, I mean, to make it even more literal and simple. Like, there's a rescue worker. Hey, give me your hand, and I'm trust me, you're gonna be okay. And you're like, wow, who are you? I just need some time to, and it's, to your point, like that's where you see it so clearly. It's so stuck in the intellect
Hmm.
rather than in the being. So anyway, sorry to jump in there, but I just thought it would be useful for the listener to see that.
Yeah, no, well, no, I think you're spot on. And that's why, in business, in crisis mode, all of these uh, thought created illusions and attachments disappear. Like you and I will remember when we were at Mimecast together, and the company had a major outage. Probably the first time that ever had experienced a problem of that on that scale. And I still look back at it now and just think, wow, because everything fell away. Like, no one worried about who reported to who, or, it was just everyone just did some amazing stuff. Whether it was, and I probably told about, whether it was salespeople going out at night and buying pizzas for the devs because they're like, well, I can't do anything else, but I can keep you fed. Um, Senior executives just jumping on with the support desk and just taking calls. And it was incredible. And it goes to show that, we're really lucky, because when whatever was designing us did such a good job that they said, you know what, we better make sure that the trip automatically switches in case of crisis, because otherwise these guys will be extinct within a very short time frame. Because because this is so natural. And so therefore I keep coming in this one to, it's it's less about how do you design the culture, and for me this is a real, how do you remove the stuff that's just getting in the way. And I think if you change the
Yeah.
nuance of the question, you open a whole different world of possibilities, because then you go, well, maybe we don't even have to create this because this already exists. This is in our nature. So now we go and say, what's the stuff that if we just removed it would increase the chances of our natural capacity to be social, to be creative, and to be productive together? What could we remove that would increase the capacity for all of that to show up without us having to do a single thing?
Yeah, no, I think that's such a really beautiful exploration and question to ask, because I think what you're saying, and I love it, is that we can actually blow up this illusion of culture completely, because actually, um, if you fall back into your being, that place of awareness, that natural state of love, curiosity, empathy, is actually what we want to infuse into all of our businesses, into all of our units, whether it's family unit or business unit, whatever it is. And when people say, oh, art is a reflection of consciousness, and business is a reflection of the human state, of human consciousness. And I don't think anybody wants to do wrong, um, by fellow human beings and by the planet and by civilization. Now, they get misguided and they get greedy and they get into their head and they operate from this place of misguided identity, and shit goes sideways. And we understand that well. But at its very essence, we want to create places, we want to that are filled with deep connection, empathy, love, operate from that place. And then we obviously want to do things and put things into the world that are super creative and are in service of making the world a better place. And so I think it's a lovely question to say, well, actually, isn't it bizarre to think that your culture, everything you're trying to create already exists? It's already there, and all you have to do is remove the thinking about what you think you should create from an intellectual perspective, and actually capture what you collectively already know and naturally operate from, and then utilize that as the foundation for putting the right stuff in the drinking water. And I think that's just a really lovely way, because at the end of the day, I think that's exactly where you do come back to. And like you say, when you're going through hard things, when the shit hits the fan, it's amazing that that is what comes out, and it's actually the essence of the human condition, rather than what's written on the wall in terms of your values. Now, those may reflect, you know, the awareness that we have, the collective consciousness that we have, and that's wonderful. Like, good, you've managed to stitch some words together and codify it in a way that it looks pretty on whatever. But what's actually happening is you're defaulting to what we all inherently know, but are so caught up in ourselves to actually go and access whenever we need it. So I think that's a really, really um, lovely thing. And it's funny, because books get written, and I think about the Joel Manby book about love works, and other books that have been written about love being this kind of secret ingredient at work. And I know people get nosebleeds when you start talking about love, but if we got out of our way and we realized that this idea of connection and love was actually the the bedrock of what we're trying to create, then I think I think we'd be in a far better place. Now, the interesting thing is, to me, is leaders who pride themselves on doing hard things don't realize how hard this is. Because to your point earlier, if you want to transform an organization and you want to be something that grows and is around for a long time and has a repeatable growth model, you have to transform your people in order to go and achieve that. Now, that is an incredibly hard thing to do because it's not simple to understand, because it requires practice and it requires discipline. And so, and without practice, there is no accessing that. And so, and you and I talk about this the whole time, like it's all in the practice. It's all in, and that's why, you know, busyness kills the heart. So you can fill your diary with all sorts of crap and all sorts of important meetings and whatever it is. But unless you take a step back and you build in time to practice with your family, with your colleagues, with yourself, you will not affect that transformation. And so the culture that you are trying to birth or nurture or not lose will ultimately always remain an illusion, because you're not prepared to go and do the work, do the practice, and fall back to into the lazy boy of the consciousness, so that you operate from there. And when you get people operating from there, like we've seen it firsthand, we've seen what that magic does and how powerful it is. And it's like the secret ingredient, man. It is like it's the biggest competitive advantage there is, and by a country mile. And so, yeah, it's I hope Andy, I mean, I hope this resonates with Andy, because it, like, get after that, mate. Get after that, Andy, and you'll be amazed by what you experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do. I guess the thought that just popped into my head then is, and not that I think we are, but I don't want to trivialize how challenging this can be.
Mm,
Because our conditioning is pretty strong. I think the societal conditioning and organizational conditioning, it's pretty strong, and people have built careers around it. And so, there is a supremely well trodden path that will ensure that you're not going to get into trouble, you know, and
mm.
that's part of the challenge is, um,
But
is
isn't that another great illusion, El? Isn't that another great illusion right there? Oh, you're not going to get into trouble. But as soon as somebody comes along who bucks the trend and does something remarkable, and they don't get into trouble, in fact, they become celebrated, we flip our thinking on that.
yeah.
But in the interim, we hold ourselves prisoner to that fear.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Of course, that's a massive illusion. Oh, you'll never get fired if you buy IBM, or like, it's an illusion, and there's probably a truth to the illusion because it's pervasive. So it's an illusion, and it's a real illusion. If you know what I mean, it's like, no, that's definitely an illusion, and it's a real illusion. Like, there's a lot of people bought into that illusion. It doesn't make it any more solid, and that's good, because that's how innovation happens. And people go, no, I don't buy into that. the challenge, I think, in an organizational setting is to try and bring a whole bunch of people on the journey together. And it starts with a single person. So if it's Andy listening, or if it's one of Andy's colleagues with whom he's having a conversation, like how do we take everyone on the journey? The first thing I was saying, well, the journey starts with you. You will only be able to lead change to the extent with which you are prepared to change yourself. And that's good news, because that to me simplifies it down. It's like, oh, okay, I don't really need to think about changing everyone else. I can really look, and I can lead from this place, and trust that even by doing that will probably be the single biggest factor that I can bring to bear. Um, and then the other challenge, which is why I asked the willingness question, like, are you willing? Like, are you willing to challenge the status quo? Are you willing to subject yourself to the sideways glances and the smirks from people when you sat in a room going, I think we don't need half the shit that we've put in place to control people. We need to get rid of more of it, and we need to trust them more unconditionally. And, because then that means you got to cede some control. Now, God forbid we cede control. And we never really had control in the first place. Like, control is an illusion, because the only thing you can control is yourself. But there we go. So, is someone willing? And, if you're the founder of a business, if you're on a senior leadership team in a business, then, and you're really not prepared to do this work yourself, then, either put culture on a back burner or be really honest about the culture that you want. That's kind of, and I guess a lot of people will say, well, they are, and that's fine, because you can, if you're being totally honest and you're saying, yep, we're not building a love-based culture, and it's not trust-based, it's much more of a hard driving, it's much more, um, built still probably upon what people would call command and control. That's okay. Like, no harm, no foul. Just be totally upfront about it and honest about it. But like, don't pretend. And probably my bugbear is when people are kind of pretending, whether consciously or not. But they say one thing, and then you just look and you're like, well, what you say and what you do just don't add up. Because you say you
Yeah.
want trust, but
Yeah.
actually you're really not prepared to give it. And so what you're actually saying is you just want people to do what you want them to do. And if they do, then you'll trust them. And fuck that. That's not a trust-based culture. That's something else. Um, and
Mm.
so I'm all for, I bring this conversation. In my mind, it comes down very simply, it's, you can have whatever culture you want if you're prepared to do, if you're willing to really look at it and kind of cultivate it from whatever that starting point is, and see it as an ongoing thing. And if the question that I hear within it when people bring it about, if they have a truly deep desire to create a different type of culture, a much more connected, much more people centric, heartfelt, trust based culture, then you've got to be prepared to blow up the existing game. And if you're not prepared to blow up the existing game, don't
Mm.
expect to get a new outcome. And I think about that on a personal level as much as I think about it on an organizational level. And I look back on my time at Mimecast and in different company roles, as much as I do now in the context of me personally, me and my family. And I just see the truth of that. The only thing that's ever in the way of me and what I want is me, and whether or not I'm prepared to let go of my attachments in order to see what will emerge new and fresh. And if I'm not, then okay, well then nothing will really change um, until
Yeah.
I am.
Don't expect a different result. Yeah. All right, mate. Well, that seems like a great place to to end this exploration. And so I put it to you: what is the bumper sticker for life that emerges out of the word soup today?
It's what comes to mind is this: culture comes from the heart, not from the head.
Boom.
It's interesting just how much feeling, I don't know about you, but how much feeling this brings up for me in conversation, and I think it's such a, for me it feels deeply resonant with my own journey of discovery of this, and kind of landing in a place where I still feel like a kind of a sense of, it's not quite frustration, but it has that feel more because I see such profound possibility, and it's so much closer than anyone realizes.
Mm.
And it's just all like it
And it all comes from you.
all comes from you, and it's less about going and getting and so much more about just letting go and letting it come to you, rather than thinking it's something that you've got to go out there and make happen. It's like, and that's so counterintuitive. And I know that someone listening be like, "Ah, that is easier said than done." And I'm like, yes, I know that's true. It is easier said than done in one sense. And in another sense, it's actually letting go. In the act of letting go itself is actually very easy. It's just the, it's the holding on to something else that takes the energy. And I'm like, that's what makes it seem so far away, and yet it's so close. It's so close because it's it's to coin what Sharon Castle said the other week. It's not that it's in our nature, it's that we are nature. It's like it's a done deal. Anyway, thank you, Andy, for bringing another juicy topic. I don't think this is the end of this journey of discussion. I think this is rich ground for us to keep coming back into, and I know that I'm going to allow this to noodle, and we'll bring this to the surface again, and see what else comes to the fore. And I'm already thinking about, what other guests can we have on that can shine a light into this area, and bring some other interesting perspectives to bear. So love to get your feedback, Andy, as you listen to this. Share it out, and feedback in, and we will. We'd love to get some more seeds sown for us from your side, because I know there's something you're really interested in. Bilos, any final words from your side?
No, thank you for the exploration. Thanks, Andy, for the great topic. And this was really very timely, because I'm exploring this very thing with like I said, a couple of companies right now, and we're challenging ourselves to get after this. And so this was great to help kind of clarify the thinking.
All right, then, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Keep living into your brilliance and trust in your heart. Until next week, we bid you farewell.